For nearly 24 years, Caitlyn Jenner lived inside one of the most famous families on Earth. Luxury, fame, television cameras everywhere. From the outside, it looked like the perfect Hollywood marriage. But privately, something much deeper was happening. Because while the world knew Caitlyn as the strong Olympic champion, the father figure, the Kardashian family patriarch, there was another reality. Hidden underneath all of it, a reality built around identity, secrecy, emotional distance. And over time, that hidden pressure slowly transformed the marriage itself. Not overnight, not publicly, but quietly, behind closed doors. And maybe that's what makes this story so fascinating emotionally. Because this isn't simply about fame or transition. It's about what happens when someone spends decades trying to live two lives at the same time. Today, we're breaking down the deeply complicated private life and marriages of Caitlyn Jenner, and why even enormous fame could never fully hide the emotional pressure underneath it all. Long before reality television transformed the Kardashian family into global celebrities, Caitlyn Jenner, then publicly known as Bruce Jenner, was already one of the most recognizable athletes in America. After winning Olympic gold in the decathlon at the 1976 Olympics, Bruce became an American icon almost instantly. Strong, disciplined, masculine, the image looked perfect publicly, but privately, things were far more complicated emotionally. According to Caitlyn herself in later interviews and memoir discussions, questions about gender identity had existed for decades internally, long before the public ever knew, long before the Kardashians, long before reality TV, and that internal conflict became increasingly difficult to separate from relationships. By the early 1990s, Caitlyn entered a relationship with Kris Jenner. At first, their chemistry looked powerful, ambitious, charismatic, Hollywood-friendly, and when they married in 1991, few people could have imagined how culturally enormous their family would eventually become. Then came reality television. Keeping Up with the Kardashians exploded globally after premiering in 2007, and suddenly, their marriage no longer existed privately. It became content, episodes, storylines, entertainment. Millions of viewers felt like they knew the family personally. But the more public their lives became, the more emotionally isolated Caitlyn appeared internally. And according to multiple interviews over the years, that emotional distance slowly affected the marriage itself. Because keeping enormous secrets inside a relationship for decades changes intimacy, changes trust, changes emotional connection. Eventually, the marriage began breaking apart quietly. By 2013, Kris and Caitlyn officially separated after more than 2 decades together. And only a few years later, everything changed publicly forever. In 2015, Caitlyn Jenner publicly announced her transition, and instantly, the entire world reacted. Support, confusion, debate, admiration, criticism. It became one of the biggest celebrity stories on Earth. Because this wasn't just a Hollywood transformation. This was someone the public had known for nearly 40 years, suddenly revealing an entirely different internal reality. And emotionally, that moment changed family relationships permanently. Some connections became strained publicly, especially with Kris Jenner. Because while Caitlyn described finally feeling honest internally, others within the family later expressed feelings of confusion, emotional pain, and betrayal over how much had remained hidden during the marriage years. And maybe that's what made the situation so emotionally complicated. Nobody involved seemed entirely wrong. Everyone simply experienced the same reality differently. What many people misunderstand about Caitlyn Jenner's story is that fame did not solve the emotional conflict. If anything, it intensified it. Because when you become globally recognizable, every private decision becomes public discussion. Every emotional struggle becomes headlines. And eventually, normal life disappears completely. Even after the transition, Caitlyn frequently spoke about loneliness and the emotional difficulty of rebuilding identity publicly at an older age. And perhaps that's the hidden tragedy behind enormous fame. The world sees transformation, but privately, the emotional rebuilding can take years. Over time, the Kardashian-Jenner family became so globally famous that real emotions sometimes appeared buried underneath business, media attention, and television narratives. And once relationships become part of entertainment culture, privacy becomes extremely difficult to protect. By the late 2010s, Caitlyn's relationship with different family members publicly appeared complicated at times. Not necessarily because love disappeared, but because fame changes how families communicate emotionally, especially when millions of strangers constantly watch every interaction. Here's the truth. Caitlyn Jenner's marriages and private life became so emotionally complicated because identity, fame, secrecy, and public pressure were all colliding at the same time. And very few humans in history have ever experienced that combination publicly. So ask yourself this. If you spent decades hiding a major part of your identity from the world, could any relationship truly remain emotionally normal? Or would the pressure eventually change everything? Back-end index pointing down, what do you think?